Hello everyone, it's Emma and welcome back to my channel. So for the last 6 months, I've been in the Air Force, but I've also been kind of out of the Air Force, and I want to explain a little bit of that. I've been doing what's called the Skillbridge Program, and while I've been in the Air Force, I've actually been spending the last 6 months as an intern working as a park aide at Washington State Parks, and I'm really excited to talk about it because I think a lot of people are interested in working in the outdoors in the environmental zero waste space, but I've not really seen people talk about like that insight, how to get a job, what it's actually like, and so forth. Let's go ahead and get right into it. So what the Skillbridge Program is, this is for the entire Department of Defense, the entire DoD. And actually, if you want to hear my thoughts on the nuance while being an environmentalist in the Air Force, you can check out this video up here. This program is amazing. It is a great step out the door. It's in the name, Skillbridge. You're bridging your skills, right? So in the Air Force, I was an analyst and a secretary, and then I'm bridging my skills to be working in the outdoor space or something in conservation, something in environmental stuff, like I'm doing here online. Dan was an aircraft maintainer and he wants to work in the outdoors too. So this is a great way for people to build their resumes, get the skills, get their foot in the door, build contacts in their desired field of interest. A lot of us joined at 18, was our first like adult job, our first taste of the real world, and we learned jobs that are not necessarily going to work as a civilian. Dan and I could easily translate our jobs into civilian jobs, but we don't want to. So it's for that as well. It's for people who are like, you know, combat medics, people who are infantry, people who don't have a translatable skill in the civilian world, or people like me and Dan who don't want to do our jobs anymore and want to get our foot in the door in our new industry. So it's an amazing program to help curb veteran homelessness, make sure veterans are actually landing jobs once they get out of the service. And like I said, this is for the entire Department of Defense, and it's a program that's up to 6 months. Thankfully, I was allowed to do my full 6 months. Dan did 5 of his. If you're interested, if you're in the military, you know someone in the military, tell them about this program. You can just go to, I think it's just Skillbridge, DoDskillbridge.gov or something like that. I'll leave the website down below where you can browse the jobs that are available. So originally we were going to work with a conservation group in Las Vegas just because that's easiest to stay in Vegas instead of having to move again for 6 months. They got approved and everything. They were on like the DoD Skillbridge website. They were accepting applicants, so we applied. We hadn't heard back for a while. We just kept waiting. We're like, okay, you know, they're new to this. It's probably going to take a while, even though, you know, we know them. We're like a shoo-in. And then one day we're browsing the DoD Skillbridge website and they are no longer on the site. They didn't tell us. So that was really unfortunate because at this time we were like 6 to 8 months from when we were trying to start our Skillbridge program. And they didn't tell us that they were removing themselves from the program and not accepting us. Yeah, so this was like last summer. We get back on the DoD Skillbridge website. We're like, okay, well, who can we work for now? Because they were literally one of the only outdoor rec conservation type style Skillbridge. So there were some options. There was working at the Hoover Dam, like the Department of Energy, which was like kind of close to what we were looking for. There was like a couple openings in Yosemite for cleaning pit toilets. So like, cool, it's Yosemite, but all you're going to be doing is sanitation, and that's not really our cup of tea. It's very niche. And then there was one option for Washington State Parks. So we contacted them. We're like, that sounds so cool. It's over on the West Coast on Whidbey Island, but they only accept 2 applicants every year. And I'm like, what are the odds that we are the 2 that they accept? So we really wanted to stick together as much as possible. So Dan started reaching out to national parks, like on LinkedIn, like national parks, state parks, national forests, all that stuff, being like, hey, are you guys interested in the Skillbridge program? We would love to come work for you. Here's how you can apply, because it's really easy to become a Skillbridge provider. All that to say, we go through all of this trouble, all of these hoops, and then we get back on the DoD Skillbridge website one more time, and Washington State Parks opened all of their parks to Skillbridge. We're like extremely lucky, so we're like, we need to apply right this second so that we can actually get positions. So we applied, we picked like our top 10 parks, we interviewed with the park here, Riverside State Park. None of the other parks got back to us, so we're like, Riverside it is. It's in Spokane, which is great because a lot of the state parks in Washington are very rural. So we got accepted in like the fall, and then we left Vegas in March, started at the beginning of April, and that brings us to the actual program. So I've spilt quite a lot of tea on Patreon. I'm not going to go that into it here, so sorry, those are behind a paywall. But if you want to see them, you can pay $3, go watch all the videos, and then unsubscribe. I will spill some of the tea. First off, I have experienced more sexism in the last 6 months than I did in the last 6 years in the whole Air Force. You would think the military would be very sexist, and some branches, some career fields in the Air Force definitely are. So my career field was pretty chill in the Air Force. I didn't expect to face sexism here. Now, granted, I do work with a lot of older men, 50s, 60s. They have been here at the park for like 20 or 30 years. And it was never anything malicious, right? It was stuff like saying, wow, when I pick up something heavy. Handing Dan like the chainsaw, handing Dan the other saws and the big power tools, and handing me a wrench. Stuff like that. Stuff that's like, that was definitely sexist. Did they mean it to be? Probably not. But should they be careful with what they're doing? definitely. That was very early on, like our first week or two, and I was feeling so discouraged at first. I also hated the hours. I still do, I'm not gonna lie. We started off 9 to 5:30 because your 30-minute lunch doesn't count as paid. We're also volunteers on, okay, I forgot a detail about Skillbridge. You're still getting paid by the military, and the people you're working for don't pay you. They're getting free labor. So keep that in mind throughout this as well. So we get an unpaid lunch, even though we're unpaid for our entire 8 hours. So we're not getting off work until 5:30, and it's 30 minutes drive back to base. So we weren't getting home till 6. And then I had to cook and walk to Nahi. By the time we did all that, it was like 7:30. So I was really becoming hard to like make content and also like keep up with my hobbies and not feel too overwhelmed and burnt out with all this stuff. So I really, really hated our schedule at first. I got used to it, of course. The schedule plus the sexism right off the bat, I was feeling so discouraged in April, but it slowly started to become more fun. I started to get to know people better. I started to get in the flow of things. This spring, April was definitely focused on pine needles and pine cones. You have leaves elsewhere in the world, but in the land of ponderosa pines, you have pine needles galore. Mostly in the spring and fall. It wasn't really bad this summer. So the spring was tons of leaf blowing, tons of raking pine cones. As spring moved forward, then it was time to mow. I learned how to use a grasshopper lawnmower. The big beefy lawnmower, which is a lot of fun. Let's see, this spring also was time to like do a lot of repairs from the winter, a lot of fence repairs specifically. We dug so many fence post holes this spring and fixed an entire fence in the off-roading vehicle area, like the entire perimeter. So I learned how to use lots of different tools like augers, tractors, and some people are going to be like, how did you never use this before? I learned how to use stuff like drills and impact drivers. High school, straight to the Air Force where I worked a desk job. I've never had to use a power tool in my life. It was very cool to get to learn all the power tools. So yeah, lots of fence repairs, and it is very, very rocky over here. If you don't know anything about Washington, the West Coast is like temperate rainforest. It's a rainforest over there. You have the Cascades, it creates a rain shadow, and over here we have like dry grasslands. It's not actually a desert. A lot of people say like, oh, that's the desert side. It's not really a desert. It's not actually classified as a desert, actually. Also coming from Las Vegas, when I got up here, I'm like, this is not a desert at all. So it's very dry and rocky over here, which is why we had to do a lot of our repairs in the spring while the ground was still soft, but there's still so many rocks. So that was very, very hard work. May and June, a lot of changes started happening. We lost a lot of park aides all at once. So a park aide is someone who like cleans the bathrooms, does all the maintenance stuff that we're doing, fixing fences, leaf blowing, mowing. Then there's different tracks for rangers too, but here in state parks, Washington state parks, park rangers are law enforcement. So even if they don't carry a gun and a taser, they still do write tickets, they still do fines, they still manage the campground and all of that sort of stuff. So we were doing like the maintenance side. We did a little bit of the campground side when we worked in the welcome center and we would schedule campsites. Something else I did not expect to face at parks, along with the sexism, is customer service. I mean, like, I know you're talking to the public every day, but like some people do not know how to treat people in customer service, which is weird. I worked in food in high school for like 4 years, and I don't remember having customers this bad. Anyway, that's a different story. I really enjoyed working in the booth, especially because during this time we were like doing lots of lawn mowing, leaf blowing, raking fence holes. So when they're like, hey, can you go sit in the booth for a couple hours? I'm like, yes, please. It's air conditioned. I get to sit down and read a book while I wait for cars to drive up. Sounds like a great plan. June was definitely focused on weed whacking and trimming and mowing to keep stuff nice, as well as a little bit of fire protection, because tall grasses will lead to fires, as I might discuss later. And that was one of my biggest frustrations working at the park, like as an environmentalist, is why are we wasting resources like gasoline to beautify a natural area? Like, it's a park. It's a state park. Why does it have to be manicured? I get it. Some, like, campsites. We don't want campsites to be overgrown. But, like, I'm talking, like, along roadways. Why am I trimming along roadways? Especially when stuff isn't actually impeding into the road. So that was frustrating. But again, a lot of people ask me on Instagram, like, oh, is there anything you can do? No. I'm a volunteer on paper. I'm the bottom of the totem pole. I can't do anything about stuff that I disagree with in the park. I can voice my opinion, sure, but it's not really going to matter because this direction is coming from like park superintendents and higher. Let's see, but June, I discovered audiobooks. I can't believe it took me 2 months of mowing and raking and leaf blowing to discover them, but I finally discovered audiobooks. Now I've read so many books this year, thanks to audiobooks. AirPods for when I'm doing quiet activities like painting, and then I've got my Bose noise-canceling headphones that I use for doing stuff like leaf blowing and mowing. June, we lost a lot of park aides all at once. 1, 2, 3. 3 all at once, and then another one, he left last month. So, which meant that Dan and I had to kind of step in with the bathroom duties and stuff like that. And like, we didn't mind, except for our supervisor at the time not letting us do stuff that we were told we were going to do in the program because we were needed in the park. I'm going to keep this short because it is kind of a long story. What we were told when we were starting the program was we were going to get a chance to do stuff like park maintenance, as well as interpretation, which is educating the public, making educational signs and stuff like that. And while we were getting to do that a little bit, there were opportunities that would come up where we were going to go get to visit a sister park, or we were going to get to go to a school visit to actually like educate children. And our supervisor was like, no, we actually need you over here. And then I'm like, okay, fine. But then I stay there at the park where she wants me to be. And I'm like, okay, so what do you want me to work on? She's like, I don't really know. I guess maybe the bathrooms could need clean. Like, she didn't even have a plan. And that was what was really frustrating, was like, if you're going to keep me here and hold me back from these opportunities, have a plan in mind. Because like, I don't mind leaf blowing and weed whacking and cleaning bathrooms. Like, if that's what I have to do, it's what I have to do. Why are you holding me back from these opportunities when you don't actually need me in this area of the park? It felt very controlling. We brought it up to her several times, and she's like, well, I promise I have special projects for you. I promise I have special projects for you. And the special projects never came up, as well as they didn't have the supplies. One of the special projects was painting, and I'm like, awesome, I love painting. There was no paint to be found. So I'm like, why are you telling me we have these special projects when you don't actually have the supplies in place? We brought our problems up to her first. She kept ignoring us over and over and over again. So we went to the next guy up. And he was very, very helpful. He felt very much the same as we did. Like, the point of us being here isn't to clean toilets. The point of us being here is to learn skills, get mentored, build a resume for a civilian job. We're not here to clean toilets. I mean, we are not full-time, right? We were promised skills. We were promised resume building stuff, and we're not getting that. At the end of June, we set out a game plan. This was about the halfway mark. Work 2 days at the park, at the south end of the park, doing the special projects, and then 3 days up at the north end of the park working with the volunteer coordinator and the interpretive specialist. So we're actually going to get to learn some more skills at this point. So July rolls around. They're like, cool, we have special projects for you now. I have been painting since July. It is mid-September. We started off with bulletin boards, which really wasn't bad. Tedious and annoying, but not bad at all. Very simple, not too, like, painful. And again, with the audiobooks, like, it really helped pass the time and burning through books. Let's see. Bulletin boards got done. Moving on to buildings. So I have painted 6 buildings now. 5 I got help with Dan, and then his internship ended at the end of August, and he's like, I'm not painting anymore. I'm only working with the volunteer coordinator and the interpretive team. And I'm like, don't blame you at all. So the 6th building, the biggest one, I have done entirely myself. This was another frustration I've had. Look, okay, so now they've lost more parkades because winter's coming. They don't need that many parkades in the winter. I understand. But back when I was first started painting alone, there was like 4 other parkades and 4 rangers, and I didn't get a single hand to help me. What we have been doing up north has been so much more fun. I guess this just highlights the fact that if you're going to work in the outdoor space, it's not all going to be sunshine and rainbows. It's not going to be all talking to the public and making fun presentations and building trails. Sometimes it is going to be painting and cleaning toilets. Like, no matter which type of track you go with park ranger or parkade, there's always going to be pros and cons. Just keep that in mind. So up north, what we have been doing, we've gone up to Mount Spokane a couple times to build trails. We are working on a lot of interpretive programs and interpretive trails. We've done 2 storybook trails. We have revamped 2 existing interpretive trails, which those are the trails that when you go and there's signs, that's an interpretive trail. They are interpreting the landscape and the animals and the scenery. So that's what we've been doing, is revamping them because I think they were done in the 90s. So it's high time that those are due. We have been working in the interpretive center, and we have also been like revamping the interpretive center. I'll insert some photos right here. We're really, really proud of what we've done. We moved, the site of the interpretive center is Spokane House, which is, it was an old fur trading post. And so there was a replica of what a building would look like inside the fort. So we moved that across the entire interpretive center. That thing was so big and heavy. And then we decided we still wanted a barrier wall to separate like the indigenous history from the white people history up here. So we made a barrier that as if to look like you're walking into the fort, and it's really, really cool. It was all Dan's design, so tell him good job. We did do one boring thing when we were working in the north part, and that is sanding tables, which I really enjoyed because we were refurbishing old boards, sanding them, restaining them, and then giving them new life, keeping them out of the landfill. I always love that. But wow, was that tedious work. And I have arthritis, and that was easily the worst thing I have done so far in the park for my arthritis, was holding a sander like this for hours. Again, burning through the audiobooks, so pros and cons. That brings us to today. I have 2 weeks left, and I'll probably just spend that time painting, working on our interpretive trails. So that's how the internship was for me. Again, if you're in the military, you know someone in the military, do Skillbridge. I don't care if it's not in a career field that you don't want to be in. Do it anyway, because no matter what you do, it's going to look great on your resume. Internships of any kind look great on any resume. But chances are there's going to be an internship for you in your desired field. There's outdoor rec, tech, like logistics, construction, the Department of Energy, so many things. And if you want to become a Skillbridge provider, I think it's still just DoD Skillbridge.gov or whatever it is down there. You can apply to become a provider. Everybody wins in this situation except for the government, which is very weird because normally the government is the most selfish entity. You as a service member get 6 months of free training in a job that might be like your desired job, resume building, skill building. You as the intern provider, you get free labor for up to 6 months, potentially a good hire. Like for us too, it could be a job promise. Like there's a job opening right now in the park that if we wanted to stay here in Spokane, we could apply for and they would probably accept us. All that to say, Skillbridge has been amazing. I cannot recommend it enough to everybody. And just like with any job, there's going to be pros and cons. But what if you are not in the Air Force or the military and you still want to work outside? How can you do that? First off, I would just recommend that you volunteer. If you're like me and you don't have a degree in a related field, my degree is in linguistics, and you're like, oh, they're not going to hire me, I don't have a degree in environmental science. Most outdoor jobs, you actually don't need a degree in environmental science. It depends. Obviously, if you want to go into like biology, fish and wildlife, I don't know, something very specified, you probably need a degree in environmental science or a related field. But if you're just looking for a job as like a park aide, most park aides don't even, there are a lot of them are high schoolers. You don't even need a degree, period. Interpretive rangers, you don't really need a degree in environmental science. We've talked to rangers when we were on a road trip last year with degrees in like geography, history. If you want to be an interpretive ranger, you don't need a degree in environmental science. But anyway, if that's what you're worried about, start building your resume by volunteering. That's what we did when we were in Las Vegas because we weren't sure which Skillbridge route we were going to go. We started building our resume by volunteering. I would also recommend volunteering with several different organizations. So don't just stick to Washington State Parks. Volunteer with Washington State Parks, Washington Trails Association, the Washington Conservation Corps, a lot of other, related industries. You could volunteer on a national level at a national park. Really whatever you have access to in your area. And then, like I said, spread your branches out so that you can, make more connections. And also it shows that you are diversified. Now that you have your resume built, what can you do? You could probably just Google like outdoor jobs near me, like outdoor jobs Spokane. That would probably get you somewhere. A lot of state parks, national parks have their own websites. So for the national parks, if you want to apply there, it's USA Jobs. I think it's USA Jobs. I'll leave all these links down below. For Washington State Parks, I think it's wa.parks.gov, something like that. Idaho State Parks has their own website, so you can also just Google Washington State Parks. It'll take you to their website and it'll probably take you to a jobs page. LinkedIn is also a great place to find jobs and also, put that little banner on your profile that says you're looking for jobs. And yeah, those are just some ways that you can get your toes in the door as well as actually apply for these outdoor jobs. Now, Dan is actually going to apply for the National Park Service this fall. And if you would like me to, I'm sure he would also love to sit down and talk about what it's actually like to get hired through the national parks, what it's like writing a federal resume, which is a big, beefy resume. The application process is like, the interview process is like. I'm sure he would love to talk about it. If you guys are interested, we can definitely share that here. I've kind of been in the Air Force. I've kind of not been. That is also why my hair is blue. I'm still technically active duty. So I have all these piercings. I had these while I was working in Vegas, and blue hair, and I'm still active duty. And you can do that too by being in Skillbridge. If you have any more specific questions about working in parks, working outdoors as a woman, Skillbridge in general, or the Air Force, I suppose, if you have more questions about the Air Force, I can answer any of those questions down below and in a follow-up video if you guys are interested. And as I kind of saw while I was talking about this with you guys, is that like, I only remembered the good parts or like the mediocre parts. A lot of the bad parts I've forgotten because like while they were terrible in the moment, like terrible customer service, dealing with sexist coworkers, in the long term, I have come away learning so many new skills. I've learned so many different power tools. I'm remembering the great people that I've worked with, the experience being outdoors in Washington, and honestly, anything beats working in a windowless building. I was just happy to be outside. It was a lot of fun. Again, cannot recommend Skillbridge enough. Thank you again for watching. I'll see you in next week's video where we're talking about Black Friday. Should you support it? Should you not? And other wasteful holiday content coming up soon. So stay tuned for that. Until then, remember that your small changes have a big impact in the long run. Bye, guys. And then Dan was an aircraft repair guy. I would also recommend volunteering with. I can answer any of those videos